So today I am making a grits casserole. Okay, actually having a relative visit, and this is for breakfast. Now, my mama taught me this. This is a rice steamer, and you fill it about to here with water. Inside, you put 1 cup of grits and 4 cups of water. Okay, steam it so you don't have to stir it. Then I added about a half a stick of butter and about a half, well, I'd say 4 ounces of sour cream. All right, so next thing I'm going to add is some extra sharp cheddar. All right, step 1. It'll be delicious, I promise. Okay, here we are. So I just fried up some sausage, loose sausage, and covered it in the bottom of a standard casserole dish. But here are the grits. Now, a little cream cheese, butter, extra sharp cheddar, but we got to add some more stuff. So I put 2 eggs and some milk, or sometimes I put half and half, which really makes it good. So I put little half and half in there. And you see the consistency? I like this consistency. It's not too soupy. Sometimes I have to make more grits and add. And I also have added sometimes a little Texas Pete or Worcestershire, or however you say it. We never could pronounce that. But Mom always liked it hot. But Daddy always said her mouth was so naughty, nothing would burn it. So now you can put pepper. It does have 2 eggs. But this is going to be good, I'm just telling you. So here we go. Next step. Now that's pretty right there. Now when you cook it, it's going to have a golden brown top, and it's going to be awesome. And I'll tell you, the trick is to make it ahead of time. I've made it a day ahead of time, so it kind of soaks in. And this is just a great company recipe. And my parents would have this with their good friend, the Hills, Martha and George Hills. This was Miss Martha's recipe. And this was always our Christmas night delight. It was good. You can make it any time. So enjoy. Remember, cream cheese, butter, eggs, half and half milk, sausage, and it is just a fabulous grits casserole. And it'll puff up and look great and taste even better. Okie doke, there you go. Enjoy. Well, this is going to be such a unique and wonderful show because I've asked my good buddy, CSP, which is important, that Certified Speaking Professional, CPAE Hall of Fame speaker and Cavett Award winner and past president of NSA, and a really good friend of Jeannie's, to join me for this presentation today. And I hope y'all enjoyed the little video before this because it's all about how to make grits. And I know Al Walker loves grits. So I had to share that little video. I used that video before I launched my sweet tea book. My publisher said, make a video on how to make grits. I said, I shall. So I'm going to do that. But y'all are going to enjoy Al so much. He has had a remarkable career. He is still busy as he can be. He's got a great new idea. He's going to be launching soon with another good friend. I was thinking about it last night. I'm thinking this is going to be incredible. So I'm going to bring Al in, my good buddy, and I'm going to unmute him. Da, 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 da. There he is.
Hello, 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 hello.
And here's the good news. We started this yesterday during about the worst weather, and we both froze up and we couldn't hear each other.
Yep.
And we said, you know what? We better do this again. So
Yep.
Al called my attention to that. It was kind of messy, to say the least.
We both were struggling with trying to stay connected.
That's true.
Anyway.
So Al, you have just had such a journey, and we already talked about this yesterday on our first attempt. But like we said, the technology was not cooperating. Tell me about your journey to the platform and how you started. I love this story. Everybody's going to love it.
Yeah, well, it's one thing I've learned about everybody in the speaking business. I don't know of very many who went to college to become a professional speaker, or how many started out in life saying, or when they were 7 years old on the Mr. Knows It show, and somebody, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a professional speaker. Nobody ever said that. So we all just have our own unique path. So the path that I took worked for me. Wouldn't be anybody else's path, but it was mine. And it started because of my dad. I didn't realize it at the time, but I used to watch him when I was a little fella speak at churches. He was a great soloist, and he sang, and he was always in leadership positions. And every PTA when I was in school, he was president of, and he was president of his civic club, Ruritan, and he was just everything he got into, he became president or in some leadership position. And so I don't remember ever consciously saying, as I watched him speak, I want to do that. But I was learning from, and then time rolled on. I got through school, and I went to work with a guy who insisted I take a Dale Carnegie course in 1972.
Goodness.
And I'd heard about the book. One thing I didn't share yesterday was when I graduated from college in Carolina in August of 69, my new job that I had taken didn't start till January 1st. So I had about 4 or 5 months there that I had to make a living because I had a new wife and a new house. My house payment then was $57.52 a month. I'll never forget that as long as I live. I hadn't had a bill that low in 20 years. Anyway, but I remember I had that, so I had to make that house payment, and we had to eat. So my dad said, I tell you what, come in here every week, and I'll give you something to do. I'll give you a check on Friday, enough to take care of your bills. So I came in that first Monday after I graduated, and he put me in a little office, and he had about 10 books in there. One of them was How to Win Friends and Influence People, and the other was just all the classics in motivation and self-help. And he said, your job, and between now and December 31st, to read all these books. And at the end of every Friday, you got to hand me 5 handwritten pages, front and back, of the notes you've taken from your reading. And when you do, I'll give you a paycheck to cover your bills between now and when you start that job. Jane, I learned more in that 4 or 5 months on those books than I had in the whole time I was in school, I believe. And
that
about
is probably one of the most brilliant ideas.
Yeah. And
I'm telling you, I'm so glad you said that. I'm gonna make a mental note of that for someone we all dear love in our home. So
yeah. Oh yeah. 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 I'm telling you, just to and the thing that he thought, I don't know what caused him to think about doing that, but it really had an impact on me. So anyway, I had heard of Dale Carnegie, and I'd heard of How to Win Friends and Influence People because that was one of the books I'd read, but I didn't know I don't remember consciously being aware that they had a class of any kind. But in 1972, this guy was working for John Ahern, met a buddy of his, who the two of them had been through a Dale Carnegie class in Savannah. And we had been at a meeting actually in Houston. And when we got back, he told me and his son-in-law, both of us were 25, 26, I think 26 years old at the time. He said, I want y'all both to take this next Dale Carnegie course in Columbia.
Wow.
And so I went very reluctantly. After at the break at session 7, the instructor, Luther Kelly, who was assistant postmaster, because a lot of the Carnegie instructors did something else professionally and taught these classes in the evenings. And he came to me at the break and he said, Al, I want you to hang around. I want to talk to you after class. And I remember thinking, this isn't going to be good. Because in my entire academic experience, anytime a teacher said, I want to talk to you after class, I'd messed up somewhere. And so I never had one teacher say, I want to talk to you after class. And after class, they said, oh, we love you. We think you're wonderful. It was always something wrong. But he said, after class, it was just 2 of us. And he said, I've been teaching this thing for about 15 years. He said, I've never seen anybody come through here with the kind of talent that you have. You've got to do something with it. And
whoa.
Because of him, his influence and my dad's influence, and I went to work with Dale Carnegie full time and became a Dale Carnegie instructor. And that was the extent of my using whatever skill or talent, I may have had. And I think I shared with you earlier about how when I was in junior high school, 7th or 8th grade, and crashing and burning my way through puberty, one teacher out in the hallway one day said, just out of the blue, said, have you thought about radio? I had no idea that she meant, have you thought about going on radio? It didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Because she didn't preface it by saying, your voice sounds like a voice that could be on radio. She just said, you thought about radio. And the way my brain works, I remember thinking, have you thought about plumbing? And, but I didn't say it, which I would normally have done. Anyway, I became an instructor. And then after about 5 years, had done really well with Carnegie and didn't realize it. Those 5 years, every time we put a class together, and I had the central part of South Carolina I was in charge of, working with chambers of commerce, I would give as many as 5 free talks a day. It was the same talk over and over to employees.
I cannot imagine.
Me either. I started in the morning. I had my first one. It was a great training ground for
that's incredible.
Being a speaker.
We all have how we got to where, and this is so funny because so many people, Al, come into our business through Toastmasters. And when I was in college, this is when I knew I had something, like you said, that connected with the world of speaking. And I did an independent study. I was the first one. It's called Center for Contractual Studies at Columbia College, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I ended up getting this weird major going where I decided to do a fundraiser one semester for the Multiple Sclerosis Society, which was great training because I had to organize all this and that. And at the very end, I had to do a presentation and open it up to the student body. And so I needed funding. So I got in the Columbia phone book and called every civic organization. And there was one, and this is how ignorant I was. It was Toastmasters. And I said, why would people meet about toasters? Because I remember at my grandmother's house, she had Toastmaster. And I said, well, this, I guess everybody has a toaster. So surely this would be a way I could appeal to them and maybe they'll let me. Now, some groups said, no, I'm sorry. We have a full agenda. We can't accommodate you. These were the nicest people after I called and said, I have a presentation I'd like to make. And is there any way? Oh, yes. Why don't you come tomorrow night? And I just had no idea what I was doing. So I stood in front of these people. I remember it was a banquet table. It was a place in Columbia, just a little old hotel. I can't remember the name of it. And I walked in and they all clapped. And I thought, well, this is weird. And I thought they're going to give me a bucket of money. So I did my presentation and they clapped and clapped and clapped. And all of a sudden, I'm waiting for the check or thank you. We'd love to give you support. And I saw them writing notes and I thought, man, they are really going to give me a lot of money. And one by one, they said, please sit down. I said, oh, okay. And I'm going, what is this? And the first person said, your opening was good, but the closer, you needed to not push your words together. Just be confident in your close. The next person, well, I thought the middle could use some work. I'm going, who are these people? They critiqued my entire speech. Thank me. I walked out. The only person I knew at Columbia College at that hour was a girl that was a beauty queen friend of mine on the 3rd floor of my dorm. And here I knocked on her door. She came out in her pajamas and I said, Susan, would you please tell me what I just did? She said, girl, that's Toastmasters. They critique your speeches and make you bet. That is my first experience. No kidding. Is that crazy?
Did you get any money?
Oh, I didn't get a penny. I got critiqued and I'm going, what is this? It was the most confusing thing I think I've ever done.
You want to hear a funny Toastmaster story real quick?
Yeah.
I spoke several years ago. I spoke in Salzburg, Austria, and Margaret, my wife, always looks at my schedule, and she goes to the good places. She won't go to, some places she doesn't think it's going to be fun. And
I love her.
I know. Anyway, so we were there, and I spoke, and a guy came up to me. We had told the group. I told the group when I was speaking that we were going to leave Germany, going over to Austria, and Salzburg, and we were going to Vienna and all that sort of stuff. And he said, when are you going to be in Vienna? I said, well, next week, 2 or 3 days. And he said, you're going to be there next Wednesday. I said, sure. He said, would you come have dinner? I thought, that'd be wonderful. I'd be glad to. So we went to the restaurant where he told us to go. And I thought this would be nice to have dinner with a local couple, learn some more about the local stuff. We got in this room and there must have been 30 people in there. And they had one big table set up in a square with a big open hole in the middle. Everybody sat around it. It was the second meeting of the Vienna Toastmasters. And I had no clue. And so they had some table topic everybody had to speak on. And they gave an object. I don't know if it was an orange or something. I don't remember what it was. But I'm looking at Margaret. I told her, I said, this is so unfair. You know, here I am a professional. This is not fair to anybody else in this room. And so everybody went around, gave it took a couple of minutes. And it came to me, and I thought I just slayed them. And they got on around and finally got through. And they voted. And I'm sitting there going, you know, I hate to win this thing, but I guess I didn't even place. I did not get a single vote. Margaret came in second. In the impromptu speech contest in Vienna, Austria.
So, do you ever tell that story when you speak?
No, I haven't, but I have a time or two. Yeah, but it's hilarious. I just showed you how our ego can just get so completely out of control sometimes. Well, and boy, I was humbled quickly. I didn't even get a vote.
Margaret's a very good speaker.
Oh, she is. Yeah.
You know, after you introduced me with Willie and Naomi when I got my Speaker Hall of Fame, and I think all of y'all was so happy I finally got it so I could quit calling you.
Yeah, but you should have gotten it long before you got it, because you certainly deserved it.
It was so funny with Jason Hewlett. I told you I interviewed Jason.
Yeah.
And we were all sitting around after the ceremony. And I said, how many times have y'all been rejected? It was Linda Larson, and it was John Cilio. And let's see, of course, Jason and me. And then Lenore won the Cavett. And I'm leaving one person out. Oh, David Glickman, whom I love. And so everybody, David said, oh, yeah, I've got 5 rejection letters. And Linda said, maybe 4. And I said, 19. And I looked at Jason and I said, how many did you get? And he said the worst thing he could possibly have said.
Done.
The rejection letter. I wanted to choke him.
Yeah, I know.
But I want to tell you a moment of getting back down to earth. This was so funny. I don't think I've ever told you this. But the morning after the night, I was packing up my CPAE trophy. And they said, you want us to mail it? I said, mail it. I'm going to put it in my pocketbook. Are you kidding me? And wear it around my neck. And it's right there, you know.
Yeah.
Hope you didn't see my pajamas, because I
see it. Yeah.
The bug man thought, like, what is this? You know.
I know.
So,
all dressed up, nowhere to go.
Yeah, I'm read this way. Here up. Forget this.
Yeah,
I think I've had these pajamas on for about 3 days now, the bottoms. But anyway,
I love it.
Whatever. But I remember I was packing up my trophy, and I'm so proud. I'm putting it in the box, and I'm thinking, I'm never gonna fly with this thing. I've arrived, and the phone rings, because I'm in Arizona, so South Carolina is 2-3 hours behind or ahead, and so it was like 9 in the morning where I was, and I heard, I won't speak to Jane Herlong. This is Mary Alice Quattlebaum from Saluda, South Carolina. I said, oh, hi, this is Jane. She said, so I'm packing up the trophy. You still giving them little talks, you know, them little funny things you do? And I said, yes. She said, well, we was thinking about having you at the end service for them teachers. But I'm going to be honest with you. Don't get your hopes up.
Yeah, we ain't got any money.
No, that was one thing. But we like our new preacher from the Baptist Church in Saluda First Baptist. Oh, Lord, he can bring it, honey. Let me tell you, he is so handsome. And I mean, I was going, oh, my gosh. She said, so you got some competition, because we love that new Baptist preacher now. So don't you get your hopes up. You'll be happy to know that I did get that job.
Yeah, you should have asked her, well, does he have a CPAE?
Oh, and she wouldn't even know. No, and she would have said, no, he ain't no CPA. No, he don't do numbers. He knows the Lord. Do you know the Lord? I mean, it would have been.
Yeah, that's I don't know what it is about Saluda. I had a cousin one time call me from over there, and he said, we had a meeting at a Saluda cattle, whatever it was, association.
Oh, Lord, I'm sure we were there. We had a stockyard, you know.
That's right. But anyway, he said, would you come speak? And I said, Yeah, sure. I'd be glad to. It was a Christmas banquet. And he said, well, we hadn't got any money, but we'll feed you and give you a big standing ovation. Well, at the time, I had about 4 employees in my office because all the training stuff we were doing. I said, I'll tell you what. I said, why don't you, this coming Friday, come to my office and bring some of your folks with them as the members of that group. And I want you to come in my office and I want you to give all my employees a big round of applause and see if they'll accept that instead of a paycheck. So they actually paid me. They paid me a little something, but it wasn't much. So something about Saluda. Anyway, I love Saluda.
Well, that one little stockyard story. Thomas and I were having the worst time having children, and I went to the fertility specialist, and it was my first day working in the office at the Saluda County Stockyard. By the way, you should have seen my outfit. I had a little shirt on with little whales painted on it, and a skirt to match with whales on it. And when I came home, it smells so bad because all those odors get in your fiber. I just had to burn the whale outfit. It was just pathetic. So I go to the stockyard. I am just about to pass out. I'm so upset over the doctor saying that I couldn't have children and we'd have only a 10% chance. And of course, Thomas is up there on the catwalk over the hogs and the squealing hogs, and I'm trying to find him. So this cattle buyer looked at me, and here I am. He said, you that her long ago, my Mary Thomas? I said, yes. And I'm about to cry, Al. I'm telling you, after the doctor's bad news. He said, so y'all got any chaps? And I thought, like, I'm going to give you my chapstick. No. I didn't know what he was talking about. And he said, no. I said, what do you mean? He said, children. Well, there you go. That was the trigger. And
he probably said children.
Children. Yeah, he said children. Chaps and then children. And I started crying so hard. And I said, I can't have children. One of my ovaries doesn't work. Why would I tell him that my left ovary was not working?
A stranger. Yeah.
Do what?
A stranger. Why would you tell a stranger? Yeah.
I was just filled up with tears. And he didn't flinch. He said, you ain't got no chaps. I went, no. He said, well, if you was my heifer, he said, I would have loaded you up and drove you down to that meat processing plant right there. I said, you know what? And then I snapped right back. This is where sense of humor comes in, and per Jeannie always saying this. And I said, honey, if I was your heifer, I'd drive myself to the meat processing plant. So when I saw Thomas, he said, what's wrong with you? And I was crying even harder. I said, that man called me a cow. And he said, oh, no, that's wrong. I said, I know. He said, because technically you are a heifer. I just wanted to go on that catwalk and take him by the neck. Yeah. All of that to say, and thank you for letting me just take over for that moment about comedy. And you knew Jeannie y'all were so connected and joined at the hip and the heart. And she always, and Jason Hewlett said this, they'd say, Jeannie, can you speak? You're just a humorist. Don't even say that, right? You can't speak on leadership. Oh, yeah, there's humor in leadership. Okay, well, we have the janitorial staff coming in. They like to learn about clean techniques. Oh, you got to have humor there, too. I mean, anything she did, it was the blanket of humor. Yeah. So reminisce with me a little bit. And I know you're the one that called me and told me that they had found Jeannie graduated. And I was so devastated, but I would love to hear of your memories of Jeannie and thoughts to share with everybody. People love this, is, of course, Jeannie's fan base. A lot of these folks that are listening. Good.
Yeah. I was on her show. I know at least once, maybe twice, I think. And so maybe some of the people who are listening or watching this have heard me before. But you're right. I got to know her really well. I knew Jeannie actually before I got into NSA because there had been a group of speakers meeting at a Holiday Inn in Charlotte, right where Carowinds is now, back in the late 70s and before I joined NSA. And it was Jeannie, and I remember Nito was in that group, and there were 4 or 5 others, maybe a half dozen or so speakers, and that would meet to talk about speaking. Ty Boyd was in that group, and matter of fact, Ty, I love that guy. I'm going to talk about Jeannie, but I'll tell you real quick about Ty. Early on, we all did a little showcase of what we talked about, of our talk. And I remember doing one, and there were probably, I don't know, just a few people in the room. And Ty Boyd stood up and said, Al, there are three things you have to have for a perfect speech. He said, one, you have to have a great audience, a wonderful bunch of people who are there to hear you and who're there to laugh or hear whatever message you may have. And the room needs to be packed. Secondly, you got to have a great venue, a resort or a good hotel or something. And the third thing is you got to have a speaker to have something, worth hearing. He said, I've never had all three of those working for me, but now that I got your material. And so I've never forgotten that about Ty. But that's when I met Jeannie then and had got to know her, of course, through NSA. And Jeannie and I guess because of our maybe knowing each other, the very first convention I went to in '83 out in San Francisco, she called me and she said, we're having a thing called Humor Extravaganza, and it's going to be like 2 hours. We're going to have about a 30-minute break in between. And she said, have you ever been a clown? I said, not officially. She said, she said, well, would you be? I said, yeah, I'll do it. I didn't hesitate. I said, sure, I'll be glad to do it. I'll be a clown. Well, lady on my staff made me a clown outfit. I got a big red nose, got a gold wig, had the big red shoes. I learned how to juggle. I learned how to make animal out of balloons. But the problem was, she said, we want you and a couple others to be out at the break for that 30 minutes doing clown stuff. And the clowns don't talk. So my first job in NSA, I couldn't say a word. I had a little stiff leash. It didn't have a dog on it, but it looked like it had a dog. I could walk around but I learned how to do all that because my attitude was, yeah, I'll do whatever needs to be done. And I've told a lot of new speakers that if NSA says, would you do so and so? Go, yeah. Don't even think about it. Don't hesitate. If you don't know how to do it, figure it out. So I didn't know how to be a clown. But matter of fact, it's funny. After Margaret and I got married 26 years ago, she was rambling around the closet and found those big red shoes and that big wig. And she's going, what in the world have I married? And she had no clue. But anyway, but the point is, she and I were close enough for her to ask me to do that. She was actually in charge of part of that convention. And the other thing she did have me do, she had me pray at one of the luncheons. So I did get a chance to speak a little bit, but it was just me and God. The rest of them just happened to be listening in. So, I loved her dearly. We had a lot of fun at each other's houses. And Jeannie would, we were part of Platform Professionals. And I remember when Platform Professionals was founded by a guy named Newt Hilsher out of Louisiana. He'd been dead 25, 30 years now. But he and Doc Blakely and Joe Griffith had gotten together and had formed Platform Professionals. They'd gotten Robert involved with it. And that was just a group who all did the same thing. They were all Southern humorists, and they would go speak. And knowing that group wouldn't have them back again the next year, they'd refer the others. And of course, they just keep cycling, Platform Professionals through an organization. And then they brought Jeannie on. And then sometime in the 80s, and then in 93, when I was president out at my convention in Dallas, they all came to my suite, and I've got a plaque around here somewhere.
I was in that suite. I was in that suite. Yep.
Anyway, it says I got into, they invited me in to join Platform Professionals, and we worked. We had a couple of meetings every year. One of them was just to work on material. The other one was to work on marketing, and we developed a lot of stuff over the years. We had decks of cards at one time with all of our pictures on it. And
I remember that.
We mailed those out, and we had different brochures, and we had one website, and we had, but those meetings, Jeannie ran those meetings.
Yeah.
As you know, she was the best I've ever known in this business at developing material.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go into your utility room, bag up a bag of garbage, take it out and put it in the back of your car to take to the dump, and she'd make a funny story out of that. Yeah. She could take something that was just so mundane and make it end up being hilarious. And so she'd make us come to these meetings. We had to have 3 lists, and one list was stories that we were using in our talks that were funny, but they weren't getting quite the response we thought they maybe should. So how could we beef them up a little bit? The second was stories that we had put together, maybe had written, had liked, but hadn't used them yet because we weren't really sure it wasn't. Sometimes some of the funniest stories are stories that you had to be there it's not really something you can tell to a group. And the third list that you made us bring was a premise. I walk out of my house and stumble and fall down the stairs. What story can I make? And we'd actually build a complete story, none of which was true, just around that premise. And so, but we didn't take turns.
And that's good stuff.
I'd get, we'd work for 3 days in a row for several hours every day. By the time we got through, we were all brain dead, because the way it worked was I'd get 15 minutes. And during that 15 minutes, I had to decide which one of those three lists that I want to take something from. I would tell it to the group, and then they would focus all of their attention on making that story either better or creating a new story around that concept or idea. And then when it was through, I'd have all my notes, and we'd stop, go to the next person. They'd do, and we'd all focus on them and what they were doing. So it was one story at a time, and she just made us work so blooming hard. But it paid off, because my best stories that I've ever had speaking came out of those meetings that we had with platform professionals. So, but she just became a very close friend. We talked every week. I don't know how many years it seemed like, and it may not even been about speaking. It might have been about something with Elon or something with Beaver, her son, and who had all sorts of interesting things happen in his life, or something about us. And I remember when Margaret and I got married, how supportive she was of us. And matter of fact, the first time she met Margaret was, as you know, at an NSA convention in Anaheim, and you were there. And remember when y'all saw each other, it was kind of like out of place, because y'all had known each other before. But when Jeannie walked up, Jeannie's first comment to Margaret was, "Well, she doesn't look like a slut." And I never will forget that. But it was so typical of Jeannie that she would always say the thing you didn't expect, which made it funny. And as a matter of fact, I had a picture of.
I was going to ask you if you sent that to me for the slide presentation.
I found a picture just yesterday that I was going to take when we got married, and that's us. So that's
that's you.
Shiny.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have the platform professional picture when you were invited to be in the group? I love that. I'll pause so you can find that. That's just. So I asked Al to please find that iconic picture that we shared at our luncheon a few years ago. Oh yeah, show that, Al. Oh,
that's it. Oh, it's shiny. I know. I'm trying to get it where it doesn't have a glare on it.
Look at you and look at Jeannie. Oh,
I know.
Wow.
Yeah, that's back when I weighed about 450 pounds, and that's of course Jeannie's, beside me, as is Robert Henry. Yeah, on the other side. Beside Robert is Joe Griffith, and beside Jeannie is Doc Blakely. So, and that's back when I weighed 455 pounds.
He wasn't in that. I said Todd, but he wasn't in that. Yeah, wow.
No. I weighed about 455 pounds. And of course, in the mid 2000s, I lost about 200 pounds. That became part of my introduction, because now my introduction says, at the end of it says, in the past few years, which have been about 15 or 16 now, Al's lost over 200 pounds, which he likes to refer to as his evil twin. And that gets me into some of my self-deprecating humor I use in the beginning of my talks about diets and about exercise and just crazy stuff.
Did you I think I remember one time you told a story about the gym, going to the gym.
Oh yeah.
Can you recall? I mean, sometimes we develop material and it gets in the archives. And do you remember how you told that one? I almost fell out of my chair. It was so funny.
Yeah, it's interesting. Joe Griffith, who was in that picture, helped me with that story because the way I tell it is that I ask people, how many of y'all have ever joined a gym or an exercise place? And a bunch of people raise their hand. I said, how many of y'all found some little reason not to go back after a couple of weeks? And a bunch of them raised their hands. And I said, well, I joined the first one in Columbia. It was a Nautilus gym run by a high school football coach who was in Columbia area. And I remember I was friends with him, and I called him up and I said, I need to get myself back in shape, lose some weight. Can you help me? He said, yeah, come on down, bring your money and some loose clothing. And I remember telling him, if I had any loose clothing, I'd have never called you to begin with. And because everything I had was too tight. Anyway, he said, we'll go buy some loose clothing. So I went over to our local big boy store called Added Dimensions at the time. A great name for a fat boy shop. And I bought the biggest thing they had. And I played sports for years, so I knew what to pack, take to a workout. And I had my bag all packed. Never will forget walking in that first day, and the very first person I spotted had wide shoulders, little teeny waist, muscles on top of muscles on both arms. Kind of person looked like they pumped iron about 4 or 5 hours a day. The kind of person I'm talking about. And she was the cashier. And then they took me up to the locker room, and I'm up there trying to get myself dressed, and got my foot up on a bench. And there's another guy in there who apparently been coming for a while, and he's kind of one of those uppity kind of guys that just thought he was hot stuff. Anyway, he said, well, it's good you're doing this. This is going to work for you. I said, that's great. I'm glad. That's why I'm here. And he said, but this exercise isn't going to be enough. I said, what do you mean? He said, there's 2 other things you're going to have to do. But to lose all that weight, you obviously need to lose. And that's when I wanted to slap him, but I didn't. And I said, well, being my nice Southern self, I said, well, what are those 2 things I ought to do? And he said, well, one of them is you got to eat nothing but tuna till you lose all the weight. I mean, morning, noon, and night, just cans of tuna. I got tickled thinking about the number of 18-wheelers full of tuna coming in my neighborhood it'd take to get me down to fighting weight. And I said, well, what's the second thing? He said, well, the second thing is you got to run 4 or 5 miles every day. I know this is going to come as a shock to the people who are watching or listening to this that I'm not a runner. Never have been. Matter of fact, I told my family if they ever get a phone call saying, we done found that big boy out by the road dead with a pair of running shoes on, that ain't never going to happen. I promise them they ain't never going to get that phone call. So anyway. And
oh my gosh, that's
but
so
what's
funny.
interesting is about that story, the way I told it for years was, because it was true, the first person I did see was a guy who had all those big muscles.
Funny.
But Joe Griffith said, you need to add the line, and she was the cashier. And I did.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
And it added a whole lot more to that story. So anyway,
it's just
that's
like
how we.
When Lou Heckler said that the line that he gave Jeannie for the I call it spongy. I can't say it any other way than the spongy jumping.
Yeah.
Bungee. And then
bungee jumping. Yeah.
And Jeannie's last line was, I laughed so hard my water broke and I wasn't even pregnant.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And Lou said,
yeah.
I gave her that line.
Yeah, he did.
The point is, I call Lou, I'll call you, I'll call Patrick. And here's the funny thing. I'd say, Patrick, help me. Patrick Henry, he is so stamped by his daddy,
Oh
my gosh.
Yeah.
So I called him one time and I said, Patrick, I just remembered a really funny story about Thomas and me judging a beauty pageant for kids. And I said, I'm trying to put it together. And I said, true story. Jack Brantley guilted us into doing this little kitty pageant. And I told him, I said, the woman came out in intermission after she pulled the curtain back from a wire, which was a sheet, and said, y'all got to leave and come back in. I need more money. And now we're going to start competition ages 0 to 26. 0. And so here's the pageant, right? And I said, all I could think of was they're going to wheel some woman out who's in labor and go, push, here is contestant number 1. And Patrick said, gives a whole new meaning to the word crowning.
Ah!
But Al, I don't know if I can tell that in public quite yet.
I know, I love it.
Isn't that funny? But some people just think funny.
That's innocent, though. I think you can use that. That's innocent.
I think so. Too. But Patrick just bam, 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 rapid fire, just like Robert. And I said, Lord have mercy, Patrick Henry. As long as you got breath in your body, your daddy is not dead. And he was another person that we all loved, and Jeannie loved. And I remember Nito one time when I got to be friends with Nito. He said, this was just a profound moment for me. Nito looked at me and said, I'm going to introduce you to Robert Henry and you will be best friends. Just like that.
Yeah.
And he walked me over and introduced me. And that's how intuitive Nito was about people's personalities and their connections, and that he knew we had the same kind of heart as you and I do, which I'm
Sure.
proud to say. And I hope
Me too.
listen, I mean, that's honor for me to even, I can't believe I said that, but
Me
I
too.
feel that way
I do
about
too.
you and how much you've helped me, because you were the one that called me. I'll
I'll feel
never
that way.
forget, go join NSA. And, you know, in all clarity, is because I was telling Jeannie's baton story, and I've told this before on this show,
Yeah.
which was not right. But the funniest part was Jeannie, you know how Jeannie was so protective of her stories, which is the funny thing was somebody did the video of her or audio doing one of her bits. Don't send a man to a grocery store, which wasn't that bit. I think Al McCree told me it was called the grocery store debacle. It wasn't even that. It was something else. And it took her story, and that's what made her who she is or was, and still in the minds of people that love and remember her. But back then, oh boy, and I didn't know. I wasn't even a member of NSA. And I sent her my VHS tape, not dating myself. And she called me, and I said, I must be good. No. And Jeannie, the first thing she said was, are you telling my baton story? And I went, I've told that thing so many times. Frankly, I am sick of it. That was probably not the best thing.
No.
And she was very kind and had said to me, that's something that it's like a code of ethics in our NSA family. That is one of my signature stories. And I mean, so she shared with me that that's just not the best thing to do. Talk about turnaround. I had a friend. I was helping her. She wanted to speak, and she came to hear me speak. And she went up to the client and said, I just had Caroline. That was the weirdest part. And here I was pregnant with Caroline when Jeannie and I talked. Just had Caroline. It wasn't maybe a month later. And
Wow.
this unnamed person I won't name went up to the client, convinced her to hire her, and she did my speech. My whole speech, the whole thing. And the client called me and said, who's the liar? And I remember I had Caroline. I was in that back bedroom. I was so upset because I'd had a cesarean, not just because of that, but I walked myself with staples and stitches to this office and called her and said, I can't believe you did that. But and then I thought, wow, now I know how Jeannie felt.
How did she respond to that?
Oh, she was, I didn't use your whole speech. I just used some. And I said, well, you used enough of it that now both of our credibilities are garbage to this client who has other people in the industry that she will not be recommending us. Yeah. And I mean, your stuff that you work on and polish, and boy, it's sacred stuff. It's sacred. And that's a really bad thing to do when someone spends as much time and effort and energy trying to create. As I told somebody the other day, some numbers are funnier than others. Some words are funnier than others. Like when in an elevator, you wouldn't say, how about press 2? That's not funny. How about press 9 or 5? Now that's funnier.
Yeah.
So we spend time just hyper focusing on tiny things that we think will make the story sizzle. As you know, what a brilliant thing for you to be exposed to, Al, to polish and shine your stories, to have Jeannie's ear. Oh, I cannot imagine.
Well, and also, I think so many people who do use other people's material initially, if they're not, they're doing it innocently. They just don't know. It's a lack of awareness of how important it is to use your own stuff. That same thing happened to Doc Blakely. But unknowingly, at least you knew that that gal had used your material. Doc went in one time to speak to a group, and he said 10 minutes into my talk, I knew something was bad wrong. And when I got through, I asked the meeting planner what happened. He said, well, the guy spoke to us last year gave that same exact talk.
Oh, my God.
And that guy had just totally memorized Doc's presentation and given it. And you're right. It shoots the credibility of both people right dead between the eyes, and it's over. And it's just hard to overcome that. So
it is, and you are so right. There are innocent mistakes made with that. I will say mine was an innocent mistake.
Sure,
I've never said the baton story happened to me, And I
Sure.
always mention Jeannie, but that's still not right. There are things you can maybe reference to. I've referenced other speakers. I always, when
Oh
Charles
yeah.
Petty, I'll say stuff like, my good friend Charles Petty has the funniest line about
Yeah.
cholesterol. And he said, we didn't have no cholesterol when I was a little boy. Had we had it, Mama would have fried it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now that to me is not an infraction, and
No,
I have put that story and cited Charles Petty every time.
I do too. I
Yeah,
cite the people I get a story
that's
from.
different from a 3 or 5 minute story that you say happened
Yeah,
to you.
that's more like a quote,
Yes,
which is what it is. So,
right,
I'll do the same thing. So and so said, and then fill in the blank. So, yeah.
right. And I love I'm trying to think of his name. Carl Hurley tells that the 3-legged chicken story. And I love
Oh,
that story about the old farmer and the he goes down the highway and there's a 3-legged chicken and they were going about
yeah,
3 mile an hour, and all of a sudden he jerks down this road. I couldn't stand it. I had to follow that 3-legged chicken. You remember that? And he came up on a barnyard, nothing but 3-legged chickens. Old
yeah,
fella just sitting on the porch, and all them chickens just flying everywhere, running around like crazy. I said, "Hey, I've never seen no 3-legged chicken." Yeah, my boy done gone to the university and done learned how to grow the 3-legged chicken because everybody likes drumsticks. And he said, "That's fantastic. How does it taste?" He said, "We don't know yet. We ain't been able to catch one."
yeah, exactly.
And I have
Uh,
thought about that story. And when I talk about sitting on the front porch and meeting my relatives, my cousin Wee Wee and my Aunt Fanny, and I said, "That'd be so funny." But I don't do it because that's his story, And although I cited him, and I have told it, and I felt guilty, and I said, "I can't do that again. I just can't do that. That's his story."
yeah, yeah. I can see him. What's his name? I'll think of it in a minute. Maybe after we get through, it'll come to me.
Yeah, tomorrow
But
morning.
yeah, but oh, listen, you just reminded me of all those. I think that's one thing that makes us so unique, and why so many people who are part of NSA have said to me over the years that, "God, I wish I was born in the South, or I wish I could talk like y'all do." And you can't learn how to talk like this. It's either in you or it's not, and it's how we grew up. But we talk like this because we sat around on the front porch or in the
Right.
living room or wherever it may have been here in our family, tell story after story after story. We just it's part of our. I think it's part of probably every culture, but particularly in the South, I think every culture tells stories. In the South, ours are just real funny. I mean, it's not only is it a great story, they're just just hilarious. And
Yeah,
so,
I think you're right. When we were little, I mean, Sundays after church, we'd go see our relatives, whether we liked it or not. And first we thought it was torture, and then we
I know,
realized, dang, this ain't
yeah,
torture. This is a gift. But we
yeah,
had to get a little age on us to. My grandpa would tell some stories. My granddaddy, and he spoke in Gullah, and a lot of people that's a language that we communicated with down on John's Island, because grandpa would say, "I'm going to the field to put the vegetables. I'm
yeah,
going in the creek. I go catch some strips." And
yeah,
stuff like that. So I learned it from him, and because he was
yeah.
very connected with the community down there that worked on the farm, and they loved him. And
Oh yeah,
there's a story about Goompaw going down to the Charleston market and growing an Italian vegetable, which is broccoli. And they called him the broccoli man. And he went down with all the folks that helped on the farm. And there's a lot of heart connections there too that people don't realize Southern people have and are respected and loved. And
yeah,
of course, I don't know. So many people like to rewrite our Southern ways of doing things, and there was not good stuff way back. But there's a richness and a heart connection too. My daddy was very kind, and Goompa was too, and very generous. But I want to switch gears now and talk about your podcast to be. This,
okay.
Al, I thought about this. I thought you have hit on something good. This is going to be excellent. Tell us about that.
Well, I had after talking with you back several weeks ago, and I guess it goes all the way back to that junior high school thing when that teacher said, "Have you ever thought about radio?" But over the past few years, several people have said you ought to do a podcast. You ought to do, suggested that, and I just never did anything with it. And then after talking with you, I decided, okay, I'm going to pursue this and just see how I'm going to chase this rabbit, see how far it goes. And so I got to thinking about it, and I called up Mike, our friend, and talked to him and got some advice. And knew what stuff I needed as far as equipment went. And then all of a sudden one day I woke up and got to thinking about Kirk Kilpatrick, a good buddy of mine down in Birmingham, and he was on drive time radio in Birmingham and had the #1 show in Birmingham for about 20, 25 years. He and Bert and Kurt were two of them. And so I called him up and started talking to him. I said, I'm thinking about doing a podcast, and I thought it'd be fun for you and I to do one together. And apparently he had a speaker on his phone was on speakerphone, and because his wife Kathy in the background said, yeah, y'all need to do that. And I heard a holler out. And so Kurt and I started talking about it, and about a week or so ago we got together, and he had written a script for our first one. It's rough. We don't want it to be scripted. You don't want to like ours is not. Ours is just strictly spontaneous discussion here, and that's what we wanted too. So we tried that, and it ended up being pretty good, and we were both pleased with it. And so we actually went to AI, or I did. I plugged in 2 older guys from the South, humorists. Love to talk about the Lord, love to talk about leadership, love to talk about people working together better, and all that stuff. And I don't have it. I wish I had it in front of me. I should have done that before we got on. And I said, so give me a title for a podcast with those parameters. And it shot back something almost instantly about 2 Southern sages talk about wit, wisdom, and there's another W word they had in there. And it's a perfect title. And so that's what he and I are going to use. And we had a little stopgap in there. Monday he had hernia surgery, so we're going to have to wait a few days for him to get well. He's okay. I talked to him yesterday. He's fine. But we're going to get back on it next week and try to record our first one and just kind of see where that takes us.
I love the title. And what y'all need to do is bring in guests. I want to be on it.
Yeah.
And you can have topics. See, we were going to do that with several friends of mine, and we just couldn't congeal it. And so when I talked to Al McCree, and I said, Al, I would love to get some of Jeannie's folks to hear some of these wonderful folks that have, like you, that have been influenced by Jeannie, and how, we have used all the wonderful things that she taught us on the platform and as a friend. And he said, sure, and that was very kind. And that's the only way I could wrap my head around doing something like this, rather than throwing my stuff out there and say, oh, listen. But I did the same thing. I put a lot of copy into AI and just said, what title is this? And it was kind of neat. The description was fun. And I made it my voice. That's the thing about AI. You got to be careful about. Make it yours.
Oh, yeah.
Y'all should have different topics, like old Southern beauty queens. I would like to be on that. And talk about, and just rag on people. That would be so funny. Preachers, bring in a funny preacher.
Oh, yeah.
We've had so many hilarious, and you, my goodness, you are so involved in your church in Columbia, and there's so much church humor. Do a whole thing on church humor. There's just a bevy of funny stories will go along with that. I'm speaking to a pastor's group coming up next week. And I went through all my Sirius XM stuff or any of my comedy stuff and tried to find any preacher humor. And because they'll love that, because they want to always make fun of themselves and they love to hear that kind of humor. So, I love this idea, Al. I love it. I can't wait for you to launch it. And Mike is good.
I'll tell you one thing you can use with those pastors, that every one of them, if they're in any size church at all, they know this stuff goes on behind the scenes with staff, and that if the average church member knew, they'd probably quit. They'd go somewhere else, because it's church staff members are no different than people in any other business, other than the fact that they're all Christians, but there are businesses that full of Christians that still have all the challenges that any business has. So I talk about it when I do anything around preachers or folks involved with church, about how I've been working behind the scenes in church for a long time, and sometimes it's kind of ugly. It's not as always as holy as we'd like to think it is. And I said, but even though I know all the junk that goes on, it's kind of like hot dogs. I know how a hot dog's made, but I'm still gonna eat them. And I know all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes in churches, but I'm still going to church, because I'm not going for those people. I'm going for the Lord. And
absolutely,
so your preachers would love some reference to something like that, because they get a chuckle out of it.
Yeah, we had a church circle meeting several years ago, And somebody made a comment. Someone, we had to join the two circles because the older circle was dying out and the younger circle was not wanting to come, and so which would be me. And so I remember when I wish I'd been there because it would have been an epic thing. But somebody said, "All right, we're making these little blankets. Who do we give a blanket to, Deborah?" My sweet, precious Deborah lives down the road. What a godly woman. I love her. And she said, "Well, I gave one to the preacher's wife." They said, "What? The preacher's wife? Wasn't she outpatient?" She said, "Well, yeah." "Well, you're supposed to spend the night to get a blanket from us." You know, and one of the other women said, "Oh, do you have to bleed too?" That did it. Everybody got mad, packed up the scissors, packed up the fabric. And here's the funniest part of the whole thing. The lesson right before that was on unity.
Listen, the irony of church work is hilarious.
Oh my gosh, there's so much humor. Al, this has been fun. We're coming up on an hour, and I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this.
I have too.
You're so wonderful and my heart friend, and been so influential in my life. So how can people reach out to you? Give us a little Al Walker commercial, and I'll put it up in a little graph.
Well, they can go to two things that I tell people. One is you can go to alwalker.com and take a look at my website and see what I do. Or you can go on YouTube, just Google that. And then once you get on YouTube, Google Al Walker Humorist. And there'll be some videos that pop up and you can watch me speak and see what I'm doing. And so those are the two best ways. And if nothing else, call you and ask for my phone number, I guess. So
I'll put that up there.
Yeah.
This has been great.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Hug. Love you, honey. I hope you
love you too.
Well this week.
Yep, we will. Y'all have a great weekend.
Thank you, honey. Love you, buckets.
See you.
Enjoyed it so much.
Love you too.
Bye.